Okay, welcome to DES 104, Beginning Image Editing. This is week one recording session, and what we'll be doing tonight is talking a little bit about what rasters and vectors are. Since we are in a beginner's course with Adobe Photoshop, I thought it would be a very good idea to give you an idea of what you're really doing. So I'm going to start off by just showing you that in our announcements, I have a couple of things that you should be aware of. And the first thing is I've added in the announcements raster and vectors, which has a zip file in it. The zip file contains a copy of the PowerPoint that I'm going to use tonight, plus also the pages that I'm going to use for some of the material discussing rasters and vectors. So there are two things in there that you can go back and actually look at with regard to this lesson tonight. And the other thing is, I wanted to point out to you that I am scheduled for Blackboard Collaborate, the Student Help Center, on Wednesday evenings at actually 7 o'clock p.m. to 11 p.m. Mountain Time, and then on Saturdays at 7 p.m. to 12 p.m. Mountain Time. So at any point through the course, if you want to be able to come in and sit down with me for a period of time and go over some of your work or get a little bit of help, the 2 days where I would be available would be Wednesdays and Saturdays, and that's between 7 and 11 p.m. Mountain Time, and on Saturdays 7 to 12 p.m. Mountain Time. So those are just a couple of things I think are kind of important for me to mention here. Make sure that you all get a good look at that. Again, you know, we're talking about live sessions here for those of you who might want to come at some point. I just wanted to show you that we will be holding our live sessions at 5 o'clock p.m. Mountain Time each week, and that will be on Monday. I do use open mics if you do choose to come in, okay? So that should do it for that. And what I want to do next is I want to take a look at the PowerPoint. And let's see here, this one here. Yeah, the PowerPoint, we're going to look at the PowerPoint, and I'm also going to be working with this Word document. This is actually the Word document that you'll find in this zip file, and I'm going to be reading from this tonight. It talks a little bit about rasters and vectors, which is how I'm going to begin this lesson. And then, of course, I got this PowerPoint here, which we're going to go through. Okay, so let me begin with this. A raster graphic is an image made of thousands or millions of tiny squares of color information. They're referred to as pixels or dots. You need to get used to the idea that what we're working with here is we're working with pixel images. Dots refer more to printing, and it's just a slight modification of the concept of a pixel. Where pixels are square, dots tend to be a little bit round. So they just change this information when it gets converted into a file that gets prepared for print, offset printing or multicolor printing. And they use screens, which ultimately are dot screens, as opposed to a monitor. That's where the tiny squares come in, because that's essentially what we're working with when we're looking at anything that is projected. A television set is a perfect example. A monitor is a great example. So pixels refer to color blocks viewed on an electronic monitor, where the dots refer to the dots of ink in a printing space. Again, just as I said before. The most common types of raster graphics: a photograph, the designer's preferred program for creating and editing raster files, Adobe Photoshop. Frankly, one of the reasons that you're working with Photoshop in this school is because it is by far the widest recommended or the widest used program in the graphic design industry. So where you may not want to buy the program and pay the money for it and go out and learn how to do graphic design work on some lesser program, the thing that you need to understand is if you're really looking to go into the job market and get a job, you have to be prepared to work with Adobe products, because pretty much everywhere you go, that's what they're working with. And the programs that you really are going to have to get to know before you're done here and before you really become a full-fledged graphic designer is Adobe Illustrator, Adobe Photoshop, Adobe InDesign. Those are the three big ones. Dreamweaver is a good one, but I do believe that Dreamweaver is slowly being put out to pasture for a new program that's called Adobe Muse. And Adobe Muse, for those of you who may know a little bit about these programs, it's kind of a InDesign version of an HTML program. It functions a little bit more like InDesign, which is something that graphic designers who do web design have been wanting to happen for a long time. So thankfully, that's beginning to occur. So we'll see how it goes with that program, but definitely those programs are very important for you to understand, and that is really why you're here learning these programs. The most common type of raster graphic. Popular raster file formats extensions include JPEG, PSD, PNG, TIFF, BMP, and GIF. Now, out of all these, JPEG, PNG, TIFF, BMP, and GIF, those are file formats that are actually used in web design or in printing design. PSD is the native Photoshop document. And while you can take PSD files and open them up in a program like Adobe Illustrator or say in a program like Adobe InDesign, if you save those files and send them to a printer, the printer may not be able to use those files if they don't have PSD on their computer. And very often what will happen, especially in web design, if you put like say in Dreamweaver, if you put a PSD into one of your designs, what will happen when you go to export it is the program will automatically turn it into a JPEG because that's the kind of file that you're working with. So PSDs represent the native files. When we start working tonight, you'll see the difference between a JPEG and a PSD. The pros of raster graphics. Now, I'm going to focus on raster graphics tonight. However, I think it's important to also talk a little bit about the other type of graphic, which is a vector graphic. So I will be talking a little bit about that to contrast what you have with raster graphics. DPI. What does DPI stand for? It means dot per inch. Measurement of color detail information contained in a range of images. I will show you a little more about DPI later on when we get to Adobe Photoshop and we open up some files and we start comparing images. So here's just a quick idea of what we're going to be coming up with very soon. If you have an inch by inch square image, so in your mind just picture an image which takes up the space of 1 inch by 1 inch. At 300 DPI, that means there's 300 individual squares of color to provide shading and detail in your photograph. The more DPI your image contains, the more subtle details will be available for you. Precise editing. All of these individual pixels of color information can also be modified one by one. Likely you'll never do it, but I mean, you will be modifying them. That's the whole purpose of Adobe Photoshop. So if you're a true perfectionist, the level of editing, customizing available in a raster image is fairly limitless. The cons of raster images, just as there are good things about raster images, there are bad things about raster images. Pixels become, images become blurry when they're enlarged. The biggest downfall to raster images is that they become pixelated or grainy when they're overly enlarged. This is one of the main problems with a raster image. This is the exact opposite of a vector image, which has the ability to go bigger or smaller as much as you choose, as many times as you choose. So just keep that in mind. Why is that? There are a finite number of pixels in all raster images at any given size. When you enlarge a photo, the computer takes a best guess as to what colors should fill in the gaps. So in other words, it's interpolating data. It's trying to figure out, since you're making this bigger, what pixels you want to place and where. The computers, even though they're very sophisticated today and the program's very highly developed, still are limited in their ability to interpolate this way. So what ends up happening usually is your image becomes blurry, or you will look at the image and you will not be happy with the automatic interpolation that's taken place by the computer. It's got no way of knowing the exact shades of color that would be inserted. Large file size, an image at 300 dpi. By the way, just so that you know, there are 3 basic levels of image dot per inch, or DPI, that we are going to learn about. 300 DPI represents a more or less default number of pixels per inch, dots per inch, PPI, dots per inch, same thing, required for high-end printing. So if you're going to produce a job that's going to go to a high-end printing environment, you should try to make sure that your image that you're working with should have at least 300 pixels per inch. That's for high-end printing. Now, if you are going to be printing your same piece of art off of, say, instead of a high-end printing, off of a color copier or color laser copier, you only need 150, which is about half the amount. You only need 150 pixels per inch, or dots per inch, for that. And if you're going to be creating a piece of art for the web, you really only need 72 pixels per inch, so 1/2 again. So just think of it this way. If you're working for the web, you can start off with 72 pixels per inch. If you are going to be working for a project that's going to go to a color copier, there has to be at least 2 times that number. So again, 72 and 72, roughly 150 would be fine. That's just a general number that you should keep in mind. And then if you're going to be going to a high-end print environment, you should make sure that you go all the way up to at least 300 pixels per inch. It's very important for you to understand this. So if you have an image that's 18 by 24, that's 129,600 bytes of info for computer processes, which will give you an idea why some of these images come through slowly, or a program like Adobe Photoshop might process your file slowly. The more information it has to process, the slower the processing will be. Image size versus resolution. If you hang around with a graphic designer, you're bound to hear such terms as image size, DPI, PPI, megapixels, JPEG, TIFF, and image resolution. When we talk about image resolution, you need to know that there are 2 separate resolutions to consider. And then, of course, image size and resolution. DPI stands for dot per inch, or how detailed your pixel will be. If your print starts out at 600 DPI, you will have a very clear print. But the size of the print may not get bigger at that resolution. So if you have an image that is 600 PPI, and if the image is 4 inches, you can't go up. The only way to go up is to drop the resolution down. So let's say, for instance, and I'm saying it in the next line here, by reducing the DPI to 300 pixels per inch, you can produce a larger sized photo with a minimum loss of quality. So what you could do, theoretically, and this works basically, 600 DPI or PPI, if you reduced it to 300, let's say this was 4 inches, you could easily bring it up to 8 inches in size. So the only way that you really can make an image go larger is by reducing the number of pixels per inch. So if I wanted something that was 12 inches at 600 PPI, if I wanted that to be, oh, I don't know, let's say instead of 12 inches, let's say 8 inches, I wouldn't have to reduce the number of pixels. I would just have to reduce the size of the thing, and I could keep my 600 pixels per inch, or 600 pixels per inch. Because the truth is, you don't lose the ability to do that when you bring something smaller. When you make something larger, you run into that problem. I have a demonstration visually that we could look at real quick. So here's 3 images. I have 3 images opened up here. And if you can see here, this says package PSD 100% RGB. The next one says package medium PSD 100 RGB. Package small PSD 100 RGB. So what this is saying is that you're looking at this image right here at 100%. I've blown this thing up till it's 100% of its size. And if I go to the image menu, and if I go to image size, okay, here is the width in pixels. So it's got 2,438 pixels wide by 3,658 pixels high. Its resolution is 304.8, which is just a couple of points above 300 pixels per inch. All right? So that's the first thing I want to show you. So I'm going to just close this, and I'm going to go to the view menu, and I'm going to go fit on screen. There's your image. That's what the image looks like. This is actually just displaying it so that you could see it on the screen in Photoshop. Okay? So that's the key to this thing. If you go to the view menu, 100%, that's what you get. So now I'm going to go to package medium. Now notice that this is much smaller. Now the important thing for you to understand here is that this package design, or this package image, is 100%, and it has a greater resolution. This one here is medium at 100%, so it's smaller. So that means that it has less. So let's take a look, image size again, and if we take a look at this, the width on this is only 1,200 pixels per inch and 1,800 pixels per inch high, and the resolution here is 150. So you can see that what I've done essentially was I created one image, package PSD, at 300 pixels per inch, and I gave you a visualization of what that would look like. And then I created a medium-sized one, which is at 150 pixels per inch, and I'm going to hit OK. And this is what this will look like. However, if you go to the view menu and fit on screen, it looks exactly like this one does if I go view, fit on screen. So you can really get fooled looking at these two images because I'm flipping back and forth between the two of them, and they look exactly the same. Why? Because I told the program to just show me this fitting to the screen. So you really, looking at this way, there's no way for you to understand what the image size and resolution is of this. So that's why whenever you're working with an image, it's a good idea to know what you're working with. And the way to do that is to go up to the image menu and go image size. And the image size dialog box will come up, and it will show you the number of pixels and the resolution. And by the way, just for the sake of this, you can also change pixels to inches. And now you are seeing that this has a width of nearly 8 inches and a height of 12 inches. So that's also very important for you to understand, that you can come in here and you can look at percent, pixels, inches, and you can even go through all these others, which I don't really ever use. The ones that I generally use the most are percent, pixels, and inches. Now if I hit on percent, you can see that this is set to a width of 100% and a height of 100%, okay? But if I go to inches, then you got that size right there, and of course pixels, that size right there. If I go to this image here, let me hit cancel, go to this image here, this is the package large, and if I go image size, I can change this to percent, and this is basically again telling me 100%, which is not right because it is set to, it isn't. Let me hit cancel, let me hit this go to the view, and let's go 100%. There's 100%. Now let me go to image size and see what I get. Percent and 100%. So this is basically what this will enable me to do. I see how this is working. This will enable me to go in here and say I want to reduce this to 80%. Okay, and then it's going to, if I hit OK, you see how that changed? It changed. It made it 80%. I'm going to go edit undo because I don't really want to do that. I was just trying to show you. Now the third one is this image right here. This is package 3 or package small. This image here, if I go view 100%, you can see that's 100%. So you have to say to yourself, what's going on here? Go to the image menu, go to image size, and you will see that this thing is set to pixels, and the pixels on this are, there's only 380 pixels wide by 570 pixels, and there's 72 pixels per inch. So really what I did was I just took the big image right here and I made the image smaller by saving it as package medium and reducing the resolution from 300 down to I'll show you. It would go down to 150, okay? And I'm going to, yeah, see it's bicubic sharper. Watch when I hit OK, there. And now I'm going to go view 100%. View, let's go fit on the screen. There we go. And now we'll go view 100%. There. Okay, so if you take a look at that image, now look at this image. Let's go view 100%. And we flip back and forth. You see what's happening? Those two images now are the same size. This image here, which was our big image size, this is no longer 300 pixels per inch. This has been changed to 150 pixels per inch. And in doing so, we knocked this thing down in size. Let's go to pixels. We went to 1200 by 1800, which is exactly what we have over here. Image size. It's exactly what we have over here. 1200 by 1800 by 150%. So that's essentially how I did this. Now the problem here is once I do this to this image, okay, once I do it to this image right here, I am kind of stuck. I can no longer go to image size. I can no longer use this image at 300 pixels per inch. If I try to up this to 300 pixels per inch, hit OK, watch what happens when I go view, fit on screen. Now go view 100%. Can you see the quality, how the quality's beginning to break up on this? This is nowhere near as sharp as it once was. This is the problem with this. We've actually stretched the pixels and we've made this thing less sharp. So if I go File Revert, I'm going to revert this back. Can you see how much cleaner that is? Let's see if I can go back again. Undo revert. Okay, can you see? Let me scroll it down just a little bit. Let me see if I can get a little bit more of that showing. Okay, so check this out. Go File Revert. There. Notice how sharp this is. If I go Edit, Undo Revert, do you notice that this is becoming less sharp? It's actually beginning to break up the image. There is a definite difference between that image right there, which is much crisper, much sharper than the image that I basically downsized. So this is kind of what I'm talking about with these images. This is kind of where I'm trying to make you understand that there are certain things that you do want to do and there are certain things that you don't want to do. And the reason that I'm bringing all this up right now is because we're at the very beginning of this course and there should be some technical stuff passed on to you as far as your education is concerned, as well as just being able to work with the program. These particular examples that I'm giving you right now are kind of important because they represent, at least in my mind, they represent the three stages of things that you're going to be doing. Image size, you're going to be working with images that are 300 pixels per inch, and the reason that you would be working with, say, 300 pixel per inch images is because you're going to be printing a document. You're going to be creating something in a program, say Adobe InDesign, where in the end you will be printing that somewhere. And more than likely for 300 pixels per inch, you're going to be printing it to a high-end printer. It's very important for you to know the difference between these things because the quality of the picture is what makes your design really work well. If you were to work with a lesser quality picture, your images would not be as nice. And if you're doing high-end printing, you will definitely notice the difference. And that's not what you want. So that's the high-end one. Hit cancel. This one here, the medium range, image size, and we're at 150 pixels. Now this image is a smaller image, but at this point 150 pixels, I didn't try to keep it the original size. Okay, if I wanted to, I could come in here, hit cancel, if I needed to, let me go to this one and let me go image size. Okay, now this one here, there's another thing that I could do if I wanted to. Let's say, for instance, that this job was going to print, this image was going to print, say, at that size right there. Let's go to inches. Inches. So this is going to be printing at 7 inches right here. I need it to stay at 7 inches. I want to bring this down to 150. The reason I want to bring this down to 150 is because it's not going to be printed on a high-end printer. It's going to be printed on a color copier. So what I need to do with this is I need to actually reduce this resolution here. Now, if I do this and go 150, okay, and if I hit OK, I'll go image size, and you see this has gone down. This has gone from, this is to now 8 to 12 inches. So let's go edit, undo. Let me hit cancel. Let's go edit, undo, and let's go image size. And actually that was fine. Actually, that really worked okay. So let me again do this. So right now we have 7999 by 12001. I don't have to resample this thing. So I'm going to change this to 150, and let's hit OK. And you see it didn't change it at all. I'm going to go to image size, and now this is 16 inches by 24 inches by 150. The reason that is, and it's at a pretty good level here. I mean, if you take a look at this, it hardly changed this at all. Visually, because the reason that it doesn't look like it changed it at all is because you got to remember the very important thing here is that the monitor really can only display something at 72 pixels per inch. So it's not until you get below 72 pixels per inch before you're going to begin to see any degradation from an image like this. But what this did by not resampling it, in other words, I deselected resample this thing, okay? By not resampling it, and I'm going to hit cancel, and let's go edit, undo, okay? Image size. The difference is if I resample this guy, drop this down, okay, it's going to change this thing. It's going to bring this thing down to 7.999 inches at a resolution of 304. But because of the number of pixels that are there, if I remove the resample and if I change this to 150 like that and hit OK, what happens is image size, this thing now suddenly becomes 16.253. Why is that? Because actually I didn't resample the image, and because of the number of pixels that were in there, the actual image, when you go to resample it down like this, is greater size, actually almost twice the size, actually a little more than twice the size. So by bringing the resolution down 50%, I made this image twice as big. However, the resolution is half. So what I'm saying to you is that you could make this thing bigger if you have the ability to go down in resolution. The problem is that in the web, you probably would never use anything 16 inches, so there's no point in even thinking about that for there. And as far as digital printing is concerned, well, you know what? That's a possibility. If you are going to be working on something and you need this image to be pretty big, and you're going to be working on a digital printing environment like this, it's very possible that this situation will work for you. But if it's a high-end situation, 150 pixels per inch will not work. So let me hit cancel here. And the only thing I can think that you could do is, let's go revert again. Now it's back to image size. And once again, we're back to 7.999. Now, one thing that you might be able to do is you might be able to talk to your printer. And you might be able to ask your printer if you could possibly get away with a resolution of 200 pixels per inch. Now, if your printer says, yes, I think you can get away with a resolution of 200 pixels per inch. This right now is 7, almost 8 inches wide. If I bring this down to 200, okay, notice that it automatically jumps up to 12.19 by 18. So I was able to actually make this image a little bit higher by dropping the resolution down a little bit. Now, I'm not saying this is something that you should do on your own. You should know that you can do it, and you should be talking to a printer, because this really applies to the high-end printing environment. This is something that you should be talking to your printer about when you're ready to produce a job like this, and let him advise you as to whether or not you could do this. So when I hit OK here, you can see that that image looks really pretty good. But keep in mind, there is only 150 pixels per inch instead of 300 pixels per inch. It's 16 inches. It's a bigger image, but it has less resolution. So these are the things that I just wanted to make sure that you understand. I will probably talk more about this as we go on. It's absolutely critical. One of the things that I wanted to tell you, and one of the reasons that I'm bringing this up at the very beginning of this course, is so that I have enough time to be able to go over it with you several times and also field any questions I may get from you on this. One of the things that occurred to me when I was beginning my work as a designer on the computer, I worked as a designer for many years. When I started working on the computer, I didn't have a really solid understanding of this. Now, if I work on an illustration in Adobe Illustrator, that's a completely different animal. I don't have the same kind of limitations on me that I have here. And one of the things that I did from time to time, especially at the beginning until I figured it all out, was I would be working on an image that was smaller than I actually needed. So instead of me going in from the very beginning and checking my images out to see what size my images are, to do it the right way essentially, I would work on the image, and then after I spent many hours working on the image, coming up with a beautiful image just the way I needed it, I would then go to use the image only to find out to my horror that when I actually enlarged the image and put it into my file, the image looked terrible. And I'm like, well, what happened? Well, what happened was I was working on an image that was too small, and the resolution wasn't great enough to enable me to make it the right size. I was only able to make it smaller. I was not able to make it big enough. When I tried to make it big enough, I actually damaged the look of the image, because you cannot really bring these images up very well. It's very hard to bring these images up. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to start off talking about this stuff, because no matter what position that you're in, you just need to know that this is really a production tool. Right now you're in school and you're learning to use the program. Somebody, and maybe other teachers will talk to you about this, but I will at least be one that did. And I believe it's important enough that I spend the time to talk about it and make sure that you learn it and understand it. So again, it really comes down to one thing, very important thing, and that is under the image menu, the image size, okay? And then you're going to be working with the width, height, and your resolution. And then, of course, you can decide whether you want to work with percentages, pixels, or images. That's totally up to you. Resampling an image, if you resample the image, what it's going to do is it's going to take the image and it's going to resample it to the number of resolution that you choose here. Okay. If you choose not to resample it, what it's going to do is it's going to leave it alone, leave the size of it alone, and just change the resolution. So there's two ways that you can go, and you would go that way for two different reasons. The most important thing for you to understand about this whole process is the three little numbers. Number one, 72 pixels per inch, right here. 72 pixels per inch, which is for any art that you're going to put on the web. 150 pixels per inch for any piece of art that you're going to use in a piece of art that gets printed on a digital printer. And 300 pixels per inch for any piece of art you're going to use in a production that's going to go to high-end offset printing. You need to understand this, because if you're not working on something for the web, you ultimately will be working for something on print. And there are different types of printing environments, and the different types of printing environments require different type of resolution. And you have to know enough to inquire to find out which one you're going to be using. Because again, here's another very important point. While in the high-end, high-resolution offset printing environment, if you go in and if you use 300 pixels per inch, your image should probably look pretty good. If you went in and used 150 pixels per inch, the image will begin to look bad. It's just not going to reproduce as well. Okay? Now, something similar occurs if you go into the digital printing environment, where your requirement would be 150 pixels per inch. If you go into the printing environment, and if you have an image that is 300 pixels per inch, you might say to yourself, well, gee, I have an image that's 300 pixels per inch. That's great. Well, it's not really so great. The reason it's not so great is because it's a big file. It's a much bigger file. And the problem with that is you're going to make this big file, which will make it more difficult for you to transmit or go, send to one person from another. What's wrong with it is that the digital printing environment doesn't know what to do at 300 pixels per inch anyway. So, I mean, to send them something 300 pixels per inch, the only thing that printing environment is going to do is it's going to look at that beautiful image and it's going to interpolate it out at 150 pixels per inch, because that's all it can handle. So you gain absolutely nothing by sending that environment a 300 pixel per inch image. And it's the same thing with, and it's even worse actually, with the web. If you sent the web a piece of art which is 150 pixels per inch, it's going to do one of two things. Either it's going to be too big of a file, or it's going to be too heavy of a file. The difference between big and heavy is that if you don't resize it to the size you want, it's going to be too big. And if you do resize it, it's going to be too heavy, because you're going to have 150 pixels per inch at the size that you want, as opposed to 72. Now, the problem with that is the monitor that we're looking at right here doesn't have the ability to understand 150 pixels per inch anyway, and it's only going to display it at 72 pixels per inch. And the other problem is that the file size will be bigger, and that means that it's going to affect your download a little bit, which is not what you want. So you really gain nothing by virtue of doing that. And it also is not the professional way to go. So the professional way to go is to understand the difference between the three levels of resolution. And that would be 72, 150, and 300. Why do they exist as such? Because you're going to be working in the web, and the web needs 72. You're going to be working in a digital print environment, 150. High-end printing, 300. And that's what you need to do. Okay? So that's it. I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint a little bit more. And let's see what else we got here. Let's see, where am I at here? Okay. All right, pixels. The pixel is the smallest measurement of a digital image. Each pixel contains information that will help reconstruct the photo. The more pixels used, the more clarity the picture will have. PPI, this stands for pixels per inch. Generally, it coincides with DPI, dots per inch. So really, I explained that to you before a little bit. Pixels per inch, because they're square and because they basically work for monitors and TV screens and different devices such as that. Dots per inch, because in the print industry they use more circular dots of information as opposed to the square pixel. So they're almost the same thing, and they really work mostly the same way, except that in reality, when you send an image into a monitor, it does get interpreted squarely. When you send it to a printing environment, what they do is they process it through a series of screens, and these screens turn the squares into dots. While this doesn't signify the number of dots in printing, it does signify the number of photo information elements used in the print. How big is big enough? When you choose a higher resolution, you also reduce the image size. Many users will conclude that by selecting a resolution of 600 or even 1200 dpi, they will gain a larger and more pure image. It may indeed be a clear print, but the image size will be what it is. So in other words, you really are stuck with an image size. You need to have the image at the size that you need. That's the ideal situation. Or the image should be large. And this, remember, this is a situation where there are two different types of images. There's the bitmap image, the raster image, and there's the vector image. We're talking about raster images. When you have a vector image is made up of lines and anchor points, which are quite different than the grids of pixels that are used in a bitmap. And you can literally change the size in an unlimited way of a piece of vector art. But you really are limited in size and resolution when it comes to a bitmap. A common compromise is 300 dpi. The end result is almost as clear as a higher resolution. So essentially what it's saying is 300 dpi is what generally people use and what generally is required. I have asked many a printer when I'm working on a project. Now, not every project that I work on, I have access to the printer. So I have to assume things unless I'm told differently by somebody. But when I have access to a printer, I, of course, talk to the printer and I ask him things such as what resolution can he support? Is 300 enough? Does he have resolution capability of anything higher? And will it gain me anything if I use that higher resolution? And I have to be honest with you, most of the times I've spoken to printers, I should say pretty much all the time actually, if I really think about it, there hasn't been too many times where, might not have even ever been a time where a printer told me more than 300 is required. So while you might be able to get away with using a little less if you absolutely had to, I wouldn't do it without talking to a printer. 300 dpi is what you would consider pretty much the normal resolution. So it's an important thing for you to really understand. And I think it's most important at the 300 dpi level, the print level. There's where it's most critical. You have a little bit more leeway when you start getting down around 150 and 72. Okay, you do really. But when it comes to a printing level like this, it's absolutely essential that you have the right image and it should be the right resolution. It's really critical. And it's something that you should start off looking at before you get into all the trouble and information that you're going to go put into creating an image in Adobe Photoshop. Image resolution and print quality. The lower the image resolution, the less information is saved about that image. 75, or actually should be 72 DPS image is normally found on the internet. Has enough information to display a good quality image on your computer screen, but too little to produce a good quality print. This may seem a little bit redundant to you, but it's absolutely essential that you understand these things when you walk away here tonight. To produce a printed image, we will use a minimum print resolution of 150 to 300. And so we're talking about a printed image. I'm generalizing here. 150 would be specifically a color laser copier or a digital printer. Unless it's a high-end digital printer or a 4-color process environment where you would need 300 pixels per inch. Really important that you know these things. All right, common image format. No, I didn't get it. Hold on. Come on. This thing freezed on me. Here we go. Common image file formats. Whoops. Main difference between image file formats is whether the image information used to define the picture is compressed to save space or uncompressed, sometimes called lossy, where the file size is large but all the information is retained. Essentially what that means is when you are going to be creating an image like, say, a JPEG, for instance, you could save the JPEG without compressing it. The reason that one might compress the image, and I can show you how to do that real quick, actually. Let me do a demonstration of that. Let me come in here. Let me open up package small.psd. There's my image. I'm going to go view 100%. There. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go File, Save As, and I'm going to go into my Design 101 Image Editing Week 1, Package Small. I'm going to call this Package Small, just that's all I need to do. And I'm going to change it to JPEG, and I'm going to hit Save. Now, the JPEG options dialog box comes up. If I wanted to, I could compress this image here, but I don't want to compress this particular image. So what I would make sure is that this image options, which is set basically a set for quality, is set to 12. Now I could come in here and I could do this. I could go high, and notice that you see it dropped it down to 8, or I could go medium and it dropped it down to 5, or I could go low and it dropped it down to 3. Now it's a little hard for you to see, but believe me when I tell you, what's happening is image data is being thrown away here. Now I don't want to use this. I don't like this particular device, so I don't use this. So what I generally do with this is I keep this set on maximum. This is, and see here, it didn't even set it to maximum. I'm going to set it all the way to 12 to maximum. Now notice that this is 280.1K. Now if I come down here and I drag it down to low, it's 40.5K. Now what does that tell you? That tells you that that is the amount of data that was thrown away in order to make that a low resolution image. So all you have to do is think for a minute about those numbers, and you can see for yourself that they threw away a tremendous amount of image data when we reduce this way. So I don't use this. I keep this set to maximum. 280K, that is a very big file. But for my purposes, perhaps I'm using this in a way where I need that data. So I'm just going to hit OK on this. And now I've saved that. Now this has been changed to package small JPEG. I'm going to close that, and I'm going to go File, Open Recent, and I'm going to look for package small PSD. So now I've got package small PSD back. This is the file that I just made that with. And now I'm going to go and show you how I saved this the other way. I'm going to go to the File menu, and I'm going to go Save for Web. And I get the Save for Web dialog box. And it can show you a couple of things. It can show you what the original looks like, and it shows you it's 635K. It can show you the optimized, which will give you the amount of optimization, which brings it down to 20.19K. I generally work with 2UP. The reason I work with 2UP is so I can do a comparison of the two. Now, if I'm using this particular method because I'm going to save this for the web. Now I want to show you something. I'm going to click on this, and I'm going to drag this all the way down to like 1. Now just 3, that's good enough. Now I want you to take a look at this image. You have to be able to see what's going on here. There's all kinds of degradation and artifacting going on. Why is that happening? That's happening because I'm asking the program to interpret the image and remove image to make it as small as possible. This is 635K, which means kilobytes of information. This is only 6K, a little over 6.5K of information. Now, I mean, that's great. That's really low. But when you look at the image and the image looks like that, not so good. So that means essentially that I should not expect to be able to use this image. Nobody would accept this image. So what I need to do is I need to start bringing the quality up. And as I bring the quality up, you can see the image will start to improve. Now, it'll also grow in size down here. The object in this particular case is to bring this resolution or the quality slider up until you reach a point where you get an image that you like and a size that you like. This image here is beginning to look okay. I might even be able to get away with that image. Why? Because I'm going to be using it on the web. I'm not going to be using it in print. And I'm looking at it right now, and yeah, this one looks quite a bit better, but this one don't look too bad. So maybe I'll push it a little bit further up to, say, 50. Let's go to about 50. That's close enough. So now I brought it up to about 50, and you know what? I think I could probably live with 50, and I got 42.36K. So what I've done with this particular image is I brought it into here, and I've made it go from 635K all the way down to 43.34K. And I think that's great. And I'm going to hit save. And this is going to go into my, give me a second, DES 104 image editing week 1. And I'm going to call this package small underscore web. And hit save. Okay. Now I'll do one more just for the heck of it. Let me go save for web. And let me come in here and let me drag this slider all the way down to 0. Or let me just make it 1. So I don't, it's 3 is fine. And I'm going to hit save. And I'm going to call this underscore bad. Okay, so now I have 3. Let's hit save. Okay, so now I have 3. So now what I'm going to do real quickly is come in here to DES 104 image editing week 1. And I have 3 images. Here's my package. There's my one. That's the one that I just created, small bad. Look at it. That image doesn't look all that good, does it? Now, if I move to the next one, I think I can. No, I can't. I got to open them up. I don't even know how to work that thing. Here's the other one. This is so basically what this is just basically without any kind of reduction whatsoever. And that's what it would look like. And that looks pretty good. And then this one here is the web version. And I would say that if you compare to 3, let me move them over here, compare to 3 of them, and let me open that one. Let me bring this down. Let's compare to 3 of them. You can see, I think you got a pretty good idea what I'm talking about here. There's the 3 of these guys. So here is the that's what the original looks like, and that's a pretty large file. This is the bad one, and this one here is the web one. Okay, so these two don't look too bad together. If we drag them side by side, they look pretty good. So the idea is that you want to try to reduce this down as much as you can without losing the quality of the image. Okay, and if I close all these and if I open this up, you can see that if I click on this first one here, and if I go properties, you can see that this one here has 7.35 kilobytes of information. And this one here has, sorry, I did that wrong, properties. This one here has 270K. That's a big file, 270K. Hit cancel. And this one here is a web, wrong way again, properties, 44.3K. So really the bottom line is this guy right here, 7.35K. Wow, that sounds real good, doesn't it? But if you open it up, that's what it looks like. You can't use it. It just doesn't look bad. So the key to this whole thing is understanding that you're going to try, this is what you're going to try to do. You're going to try to take something like this from 270 kilobytes to something like this, which is 43.2 kilobytes. That's the goal of what you're trying to accomplish with this. That's the goal. And let's see here, where am I at here? Okay, yeah. So let me get through with these and then we'll go on and I'll show you how you do your project for the week. Once an image has been captured, it can be saved in various formats. Some are as follows. JPEG. Now, the JPEG can be used either in print. It can also be used in the web. I use JPEGs in print and web. There are printers who would prefer you don't use the JPEGs. They tend to prefer to use a TIFF file. But a printer can use a JPEG file. Now, there's one other thing that I'm going to talk about when I get done with this, and that is RGB as opposed to CMYK. We'll talk about that in a minute. But this file format is perhaps the most common image format, and I'm sure you've all at least heard of JPEGs. Oops, I'm actually a little premature on that. Come on. Oh, come on. Man. You can shrink the size and crop the picture to meet your demands. However, because it compresses the photo, you also lose information that make the JPEG blurry or even pixelated. So what you have to understand about a JPEG image is you got to be very careful when you create a JPEG and you recreate a JPEG, because every time you recreate a JPEG, you throw away some of the information. So one of the things that you don't want to do is make a JPEG more than once. I mean, it may seem a little stupid, but believe me when I tell you, if you have a JPEG, you convert it into a Photoshop file, you save the Photoshop file, and you work on the Photoshop file, and you keep the Photoshop file in the end. Because if you want to make an image smaller from a Photoshop file, you can. But if you create a JPEG and you make a JPEG smaller, whatever information you threw out the first time you made that JPEG, you're going to double it, or you're going to add to it the next time you make that JPEG. So you don't want to do that. And again, this thing is going to start acting up. TIFF. This is a lossless file format used primarily in print. Just so that you understand this, if you try to put a TIFF into a web page, it's not going to work. You can't put a TIFF into a web page. Web page don't know what to do with a TIFF. It won't be able to explain it, or display it. So you really should avoid using a TIFF and understand that it is primarily used for print. What it means is that and TIFF means tagged image file format. That's essentially what a TIFF means, tagged image file format. You can do virtually everything you want to do with a JPEG as far as editing, but well, that's a repeat. I don't know what happened there. The resulting file sizes are much larger, which makes a TIFF file difficult to transmit over the internet. It's impossible. And bottom line is, it's not just because the file size is greater, it's because, again, it doesn't know what to do with that file format. Common image file formats, PDF. If you've ever worked with PDF, what you can do primarily is you can use almost every program, InDesign, Photoshop, and Adobe Illustrator to create PDF. And PDF does mean portable document file. It primarily was developed by Adobe. And what it basically does is it basically packages your page. So let's say, for instance, you're working on a project in Photoshop that has images, several different layers of images and effects, and you have type and things. Well, what this PDF is able to do is it's able to capture all that data, all that information, and make a file that you can open up, and even open up in another program, and the information that's there will display. So, like, for instance, I use a type style on my computer that you don't have on your computer, and I send you a PDF because the PDF has captured the data. One of the things it captures is the type that was used. Now, it doesn't capture the entire font library item, but what it will generally do is it will capture the part of the library that you used, meaning the letters that you use will be embedded essentially into the PDF. So as long as you open it up as a PDF on your computer, it can display that font. If you go in and you try to open it up in Adobe Illustrator, you're going to get a warning telling you that the font's not being found. Why? Because Adobe Illustrator is a different kind of file, and if you open up a PDF in Illustrator and you don't have the font on your machine, you're not going to be able to display that font. It's going to have to substitute the font. The only way around that, of course, is to go create outlines with the type, turn them into objects, which you can do. Some users have a photo layout with text using a program that can be exported, export the completed document as a PDF. PDF image files are more complex and may not always produce quality results if settings are incorrect. Common image file formats, PNGs. The PNG is a raster graphic file. It supports lossless data and compression. PNG was created as an improved, non-patented replacement for GIF. So essentially, what you have with a GIF and what you have with a PNG is you have some level of transparency. In both cases, a GIF and a PNG will allow you to have areas within your image that are transparent. You can't have any transparency with a JPEG. So the benefit of a ping is that it gives you alpha transparency, which are multiple levels of transparency, which GIFs really didn't do. And GIFs are old technology. So while some people still use GIFs, the majority of people now are working with pings, which gives you a better level of transparency than GIF does. And it actually gives you a much better image. So a ping, and it's actually, there are two pings, ping 8, ping 24. The ping 24 is the one that you probably will use most often once you get rolling with this, because again, you want transparency at some time or other, and this is one way to get it. All right, one more slide left. Raster versus, both raster and vector graphics are exported in one of the aforementioned file formats for usage in a production environment. Very important point, and that is whether you're working with a raster file, a .psd, which is a native file form in Adobe Photoshop, or a vector file format, an Adobe AI file. Neither one of those two files are too well accepted by any kind of a production environment. So essentially, while it's a great idea to keep your raster or vector files, your PSDs and your AIs, because you may have to revisit them and make changes or make different sized images from them, what you want to end up doing is you want to end up exporting these files into some other file format, a TIFF file, a PNG file, a JPEG file, whatever file you need to go into the type of environment you're working for. So for the web, PNG and JPEG are predominantly what you'll be using, although you could use GIFs as well. I generally never use a GIF. I pretty much always myself rely on PNGs and JPEGs. And for print, what's nice about a PDF is you can save a piece of art from Illustrator or Photoshop as a PDF, and PDFs are highly acceptable. So PDF is a great file format for you to get comfortable using. EPS, which is an encapsulated PostScript file, that's another file that you can use. And then the TIFF file. The EPS file primarily, you'll find you'll use that more for files that you're creating in Adobe Illustrator, because it tends to be a little more vectory in its makings. And the TIFF file, you'll probably use that a little more for print. And again, EPS and TIFF are more for print than they are for anything else. I mean, you just don't use them for the web at all. And the correct image file format, size, and resolution are essential to obtain the correct results. So, I mean, I'm sorry to put you through all this. I know it's probably very boring to go through this whole thing, but it is absolutely essential that you understand that there are production things that are involved in this. It isn't just a game that you can open up an image and start tearing an image apart and create an image, because again, if you create an image at the wrong resolution and the wrong size, you might not be able to salvage work. And it's a real shame to, and I've done this. I'm only telling you this because I've actually done this. I've actually spent half a day working on something, and it was beautiful. What I had was absolutely sensational. And then I come to find out that it isn't going to work because it's not going to be able to be big enough. And then I have to figure out what can I do to save it. If I have a bigger image, I have to go back in and try to do all that work over again. So again, it's absolutely essential for you when you start working on this to make sure the first thing that you do when you start playing around with your image is to have an understanding of where you're going to go with it, what you're going to do with it, what size you're going to need, what resolution you're going to need, and what in the end here, what is the color mode that you need. Now, I didn't talk to you about color mode yet, so I'm going to close this. Open Photoshop back up a second, and let's go to package 1. I can close these two guys here. No. I'm going to get rid of that and close that. Okay, I'm going to go View, Fit Artboard, or 100%. That's what I want. 100%. Nope, actually, fit on screen. That's what I want. There we go. Okay, so now I have this image here. Now, if I look up at the top here, this says package.psd at 21.7%. Well, that's telling me some stuff that you need to know about. First of all, it's telling me the name of the file, and it's telling me the file format. It's a PSD, so I know that this is a native file. And it gives me a percentage, 21.7%. what that's telling me is at the image size that this is, at this image size, 12.19 by 18.29 at a resolution of 200 pixels per inch, this thing, to reduce it to fit the screen, is 21% of the full image, meaning that if I go 100%, now you're looking at it at 100%. That's really all that's telling you. And notice that when I did that, this changes to 100%. So go to view again, fit on screen, it is now 21.7%. Clear. So then the next thing it says RGB and 8-bit. So, okay, so that means that this image right now is RGB. So let me go to the window menu and let me open up channels. Here's the channels. These are what I want to show you so that you get a sense of what I'm talking about. There are 3 channels that you're working with in RGB, red, green, and blue. Well, that's essentially what it means. If I click on the red channel, that's what the red channel looks like. If I click on the green channel, that's what the green channel looks like. And the blue channel, that's what the blue channel looks like. Okay? So essentially, RGB, 3 channels. This is what you're going to be using when you're working on the web. So if this image we're going to be used in print, let me go back to the composite. That's the composite. This is showing you what all these together equal. That's what it looks like, okay? So if I need this thing to go for print, I'm going to go to the image menu, and I'm going to go up to my color modes. And notice that I have bitmap, grayscale, index color, RGB, CMYK, lab color. There's a bunch of different things in here that I want to work with. Primarily what I use is my CMYK color, my RGB color. CMYK color is when I'm ready to convert this. This is usually like the last thing I do when I'm working on a color image, and I know I'm taking it into a print environment. I don't go in from the very beginning and change it to CMYK. I usually work with the image in RGB until I'm pretty much done with it. Then I go in and I come in and I change it to CMYK. Watch what happens. You get this warning. You are about to convert to CMYK using the US web-coded SWOP V2 profile. Whoa, what's that mean? Okay, what does it mean? It means essentially what it says. There are different printing materials that you're going to be printing on. One of the most common is the US web-coded SWOP. What that means essentially is the US is the version. Web-coded means that it's going to a web press. It's a coded stock. That's really what that's telling you, okay? And it may not be what you intend. To choose to a different profile, you're going to go to the edit menu and you'll convert the profile, which I'll show you where that is in a second. So I'm just going to accept this now because this is the default, and this is generally what you're going to be using. A coded stock, web-coded stock is probably pretty good. But again, this is something you talk about with your printer, but you should know this as well. So I'll hit OK, and now you see what happened here. I now have 4. I no longer have RGB. I have cyan, I got magenta, I got yellow, and I got black. Each one of these separate plates give me the amount of that color in black. So you can see that not a whole heck of a lot of cyan is being used in this image. Magenta, a bit more magenta. Yellow, the majority of what's going on here is yellow. And then there's black. Okay? And then, of course, this is the composite image. So CMYK is how you would save this file if you're going to send it to a printer. RGB is how you're going to save it if you're going to send it to the web. Now let's go to the file menu and let's go, where are we at here? Where are we at here? Where are we at? Where? Edit, maybe that's it. Edit, convert to profile. There we go. Convert to profile. Okay, so the destination space, which is this, there are all sorts, as you can see, there are all sorts of different kinds of profiles that are in here. Now, to be honest with you, I very seldom use most of these. And the majority of the time, the only way I would change a profile is if I had a conversation with a printer who is telling me that they need a particular kind of profile. Now, look, down here, U.S. sheet coded, or I'm sorry, U.S. sheet fed coded, U.S. sheet fed uncoded. So if you're working on individual sheets of coded stock, this is what you would choose right there. If, on the other hand, you're working on sheet fed uncoded, you would choose that. Now, what's the difference between coded and uncoded? Okay, so it's really simple. What they have on a coded stock is a lamination of surface, some sort of a surface. Either it's a wet coating or a laminated coating, and that's what the coded stock would be. Uncoated stock would be paper that has no coating. It is just regular paper that has no coating. The printing would be different on both, and it would require a different visual setup, and it would also require a different type of ink to be applied to it. Now, I know I'm getting way into the woods here, but these are some of the things that you should just be aware of. And again, whether you ever change this from uncoded to coded, I'm going to leave it at coded because that's actually a pretty good one. Hit OK. Okay. The most important thing for you to understand is here, I'm going to go edit, undo. Actually, before I go undo, CMYK, go edit, undo. Edit, I'm sorry, step backwards, and now this is back to RGB. Okay, so really the most important part of this whole thing at this point is for you to decide between using RGB and CMYK. And why you would use RGB is because you're working at this time on something that's going to be for the web. And it is kind of important for you to think about this. If you're working on something that's going to be used in print, you really need to go in from RGB into CMYK. Okay, so really that's pretty much what I want to talk to you about with this. I got one more thing to do with you tonight, and that is to talk to you a little bit about what you're going to be doing this week. All right, so first of all, you're going to have a discussion, and the discussion is about retouching. How much is too much? Now, that's something that you probably need to do a little bit of research on. Next week, I think it's next week. I'm not sure because I don't have it in front of me, but I think it's next week. I'm going to be showing you some retouching. And I will give you an idea of some of the things that you can do when it comes to retouching. I don't do a lot of retouching. I do a lot of weirder stuff than that. So I don't really actually get a chance to do a tremendous amount of retouching. The truth is, you're going to probably end up doing quite a bit of work in a retouch. You know, so the question is, how much is too much? In what situations do you think photo retouching is helpful? What situations do you think photo retouching is harmful? What do you think? What do you think that retouching? Why do you think retouching has become so popular? And why do you think images that have been retouched should have a warning on them? Again, you'll do some research and you'll think about these particular points and you'll come up with a discussion. And what I will do is I'll come in and I'll add to that discussion my opinion on these things. I'm not going to get into my opinion on them right now because I would much rather let you guys talk about this a little bit, and then I'll come jumping in a couple of days and I'll start putting in some of my thoughts and see whether we can maybe, you know, get somewhere with this. And that brings me to a very important point I should really mention to you. I've had some trouble in the past with discussion forums. It's absolutely essential for you to understand one thing, and that is a discussion forum represents a conversation between you, your fellow students, and me. If you guys wait until Saturday night at the very last minute to put either your initial discussion or your comments, you are supposed to put in 2 comments to students, I'm going to deduct penalties, because a discussion forum requires you to contribute through the course of the week. Normally, you have until Wednesday to put your initial post in. Wednesday, by the end of the day, your initial post should be in. Now, you should know this because I'm sure this isn't your first class. But in order for me to make sure I have no trouble at any point when I start deducting, when people start doing this stuff, you need to understand, by Wednesday, your initial post has to be in. It has to be date marked date stamped by Wednesday, no later than, in order for me to give you full credit. Now, the other thing is you need to put in at least a minimum of 2 replies, and ideally they should be on different days. In other words, you don't go in this next day and do 2 replies. You ideally should be doing them on different days. And I'm begging you, please do not put them in at the end of the week, because I will punish you by taking points away. Because I've told you here, when you put them in at the end of the week, it's only showing me that you're desperately trying to get them in. You haven't been resourceful with your time and found the time to contribute through the course of the week. It's a discussion. If you put them in at the end of the week, nobody's going to really be bothering to look at them and send you a reply. The whole point of this is I want to get interaction between the students. The only way that happens is if you post your replies early. Wednesday night's perfect. Thursday night's perfect. Friday's even okay. People have some time to get in a reply on it. I know we don't have a lot of time, but the bottom line is, in order for this to work properly, you have to be respectful of what you're doing, which is a discussion forum. And it involves 2 very specific things. An initial statement by you that must be put in by Wednesday, and then 2 statements talking to another student about what they said. In other words, you're looking at this and you're critiquing what another student said. That's what it really comes down to. So please try to understand it's a very important thing for me. If you would like me to, maybe what I'll do tomorrow is I'll try to go in and I'll try to put an announcement in for this. But it is absolutely essential that you understand 1 initial post no later than Wednesday, and 2 separate replies to different students on different nights. 3 pieces in total. And please, for your sake, not mine, don't submit at the last minute. I say this to you because I've been through so many classes and I've had so many students do this, and then so many students, when I give them when I take the points off, turn around and get all outraged telling me, well, I got it in on time. I got it in within the deadline. Technically, you did, but really, you didn't, because this is a forum, a discussion, and the discussion takes place through the course of the week, not at the last minute. That's just putting something in so that you can say you got it in. That is not contributing to a discussion. So I hope I make that very clear and you understand that I'm going to be kind of a toughie when it comes to that, okay? That's all I need to say. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to come in here and I'm going to week 1, and I'm going to open up my, let's see where we at here, my wallpaper. Okay, so here's my wallpaper. There's my wallpaper. Now, I am going to kind of retrofit this thing and show you how I created this wallpaper. The only reason I'm even doing this is so that you can kind of see some tricks from me and get a sense of how this was created. So I guess the first thing that I want to do with this is let you understand that this wallpaper that you see here is created by a large number of different layers that are working together to create this image right there. And what I can do literally is I can start layer by layer, shutting all these layers down. There goes the first layer. There goes the second layer. There goes the third. Oh, I turned that one on instead of off. There goes the third layer and the fourth layer, the fifth layer, the sixth layer, the seventh layer, the eighth layer, and the ninth layer. And I'm back to where I started with this. So you can see that I literally have a whole bunch of different layers that are doing all kinds of different things to essentially create this piece of art right here. That's what it takes to create this. So with that being said, I'm going to show you a little bit about how I did this myself. The reason I'm really doing this is because I want to give you some ideas as to how to work with Photoshop and what you can do to create something kind of interesting. All right. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to the image menu and go to image size, and you'll see that this image is set to a width of 33.33 by 22 by 72. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit OK, and I'm going to go File, Save As, and I'll call this Wallpaper Start. Whoop, wallpaper underscore START, wallpaper start, and hit save and hit OK. So now I basically got this one, wallpaper start, and I'm going to go File, Open Recent, and I'm going to go and open wallpaper again. So now I have wallpaper and wallpaper start. And what I'm going to do is I am going to come down here and create a new layer. All right, and I'm going to call that layer 1, bring that all the way down to the bottom. The reason I'm doing this is because I'm now going to select all these other layers here, and I'm going to delete them. If it'll let me. Why isn't it letting me? Why can't I delete these things? Let me try it one at a time. Delete. I don't want to do it one at a time. Why can't I? Can't. Oh, you know why? I wonder if they're locked. I got them locked. That's what the problem is. So I got to unlock these layers. There we go. Let me have a second to unlock these guys. That's probably what the problem was. Okay, now if I select all of these guys and I hit delete, delete, they're all gone. Okay, so now I have layer 1. And it really is the same document except I just threw everything away. All right? All right, so now let me begin to give you an idea how I did this. All right, so first thing that I did, let's go back to this one. And let's close all this stuff down for a second. And the first thing I have here is this image right here, which is 00010800, which probably means nothing to you at this point. But watch. I'm going to go to Wallpaper PSD. Let me go File, Open. You know what? Actually, let me go in here. This is what I want. Infinite Textures. There we go. Infinite Textures. So when I came into Infinite Textures, in here is where I found my. Oh, and by the way, these are some images that I have. I've had for a long time. I bought a collection at one point, and these are some of the images that I kept. And I just use them from time to time. They're nice big images, and I use them from time to time. And I thought this was a really good opportunity to use these images. So that's what I did here. So basically, this is the image that I'm talking about right there. So if I come in here to my wallpaper start, and if I grab this image and drag and drop it in here, it says it's damaged, but that's no big deal. I get this. So you can see that the image is in there, but it's a great deal smaller than I want. But because the image is so large, I can hold down the Shift key and the Alt key, and I can drag this image up until I fit the screen with it, which is right like that. And then I hit place. And there I have my first image in. It's just that simple. Now, you're not going to have any of these images, so you're going to have to come up with your own images to create this. But don't let that bother you so much, because what I'm not really here to do is to show you how to get these images. I'm trying to show you some of the things that you can do with the images to make this thing look like a very interesting presentation of a screensaver or a desktop image. So let's go back to wallpaper 2. Now the next one here is this. So let me explain to you what's going on with this. If I click on this, you'll notice that this says subtract, and it says opacity 22. Okay, so what does that mean? That means that basically what I'm doing is I'm taking that layer and I'm using what's known as a blend mode. So if I come in here and there's the subtract, okay? So let me quickly make a note on this. And 22%, yeah, 22. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring it back to normal. And I'm going to click on this, and I'm going to drag it all the way up to 100%. And this is what I actually have here. I have what looks like a piece of denim. So what I decided to do with this is, and the reason I did this was because I looked at this, and I thought, while I like the look of the folding and the crinkling on this, I also wanted to add a little texture to it. So I decided that if I brought this in and if I started playing around with the blend modes, okay, and again, I went through a bunch of different ones and I looked at a bunch of different ones. That's probably a pretty good one too. That would work. And then if I took the opacity of that layer, which is essentially what I'm doing, I'm taking that layer right there and I'm bringing its opacity down to about 22. Let's go to 22 and see what we get. 22, I'm going to go down to about 26 is good enough. So there I have a 26 overlay. Now, what I ended up with was subtract. So let me go back to subtract and see what I get. I get that. And actually, not a great deal of difference, but I kind of like the way the color worked a little bit better on this one. So I think I'll stay with subtract. This is 25, so it's not exactly what it was, but it's close enough. So now how do I do that in here? So again, I'm going to come into this start. And once again, I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to look for my image, which I believe is that. There it is. So what I'm going to do now is, again, I'm going to grab this image here, and I'll drag it in. It says it's damaged. Again, I don't know why it does that. But so again, it comes in, and notice it comes in exactly the same size as the other one. Okay? Now, when you go to do this, you bring your images in, you may not have this occurring. But in my particular case, this is what's occurring. So all I'm going to do again is hold this thing down, Shift and Alt key, because what Shift and Alt for me does, I'm on a PC, okay? So you would be Shift and Option, I believe, Option or Alt. Well, anyway, bring it up until I make it fill the screen. And now it's filling the screen. And hit place. So now I have that in there, and again, I am going to come down, and I'm going to bring it down to subtract, okay? And it looks kind of cool that way, but I think it actually is just way too strong. So again, I start bringing it down until I get it where I want it. And I'm going to say around 21 right there. There's 21. So there you go. Now, if I hide that, that's what it looks like. So you can see that it is adding a little something to this, okay? And that's the whole point. What I'm doing is I'm trying to create a unique image, and I'm using a series of images to blend together to create this image. So those are the two things I did. I didn't do an awful lot with this layer. I left the normal, I left it on normal, and I left the opacity at 100%. But this layer here, which is my my pattern or my texture, I wanted this thing to be very light, and I subtracted it out of the background image, and I set the opacity down to 20%. Now, can I tell you all about these different things here? I could, but it would take me all night. The bottom line for you is when you start doing this, remember that you have these blend modes here. And remember that all these different blend modes do different things with an image over top of another image. So when you bring the image in, start playing with the blend modes to see what they do. And also remember that blend modes work in tandem with opacity levels. So you can come in here and you can drag the opacity levels around at the same time that you're dealing with your subtract or whatever blend mode you're working with. Okay? So there are two layers right there. I'll go back to my wallpaper. And now let's bring in the third one and see what that's doing. Okay, so here's what we got. We basically got a new thing that's happening here. We have what's known as right here, a mask, all right, a layer mask. So what I essentially did here was I brought in another piece of art, and then I put a layer mask on it, and I made it blend into the background, okay? So let me show you what that looks like. That looks basically like this, okay? That's the wrong one, I'm sorry. It looks basically like this. So that's the piece of art, and that's the blend mode, blending it into the background. So let me show you how I did that. I'll come over to Wallpaper PSD. Actually, you know what? Let me put this back. Put this back. I guess what I'll do is I'll just keep adding to it. Yeah, let's bring that back. And that. There we go. Okay. All right, so now let's go to the one where we're about to do this. Now I can see the artwork peeking at me right here. This is the piece of art right there, I believe. And I believe that's it. Yeah. So I'm going to click and I'm going to drag that over there. Again, it tells me it's damaged, but that's okay. And if I'm not mistaken, I think what I did with this was I changed the direction of this thing from vertical to horizontal. Now, also notice that, you see, I haven't brought it all the way down flat. I'm using the Shift key to automatically make that thing go straight. So when I hold down the Shift key, it'll make it go straight along the vertical axes, okay? And I'm going to click on this guy here, hold down the Shift and the Alt key again, and I'm going to bring this thing way up until it fills the screen again, like this. So there I now have that hit place. So now I have that piece of art in there. But what I want to do is I want to make this piece of art literally fade away as it goes down here. I'm going to do that by putting a mask onto it. And I happen to know that if I use a gradient, whoops, a wrong place, a gradient, and I'm using a gradient of black to white, right there, black to white gradient, and I have my mask selected. That's what it looks like, by the way, when you put a mask on a layer. It indents and it sets up your masking. And notice that there's a little bit of a highlight around the edge of that. If I click on that, that means that that's selected. That means the mask is selected. So if I'm going to come in here now, and if I want to put that gradient in here and make some of this disappear, I want to make sure that that mask is selected. Then I'm going to come down here, and I'm going to hold down the Shift key, and I'm going to drag all the way up to the top. And what happened? I didn't get my mask. What did I do wrong? Come on. Oh, that's great. Why am I not getting my mask? Oh, you know what? I know what it is. I want that. Let's see if this will work now. Oh, how great is that? Let me do this. Let me delete this mask. I might have actually messed it up somehow. All right, so now I click on that, and let's try it again. All right, let me try this. Click and Shift. Oh, terrific. Why is this doing this? I don't know why it's doing this. Isn't that a mess? I'm not sure why it's doing this, but it's decided suddenly that it doesn't want to make that mask. All right, so if it's going to give me trouble, then I'll throw it away, and let me create a new layer, and let me do it this way. All right, so now I got this layer. I'm going to call this mask, M-A-S-K. Now, just so that you know, that whatever's going on here happened to me. I have no idea why it's doing that, but it shouldn't be doing that. So I'm going to go about this a slightly different way to solve that problem. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to click and I'm going to drag this guy up here, and I'm going to put a mask on that layer right there. Okay, so now I got that mask right there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this guy right between here. You see when I bring it between those two lines, you see how it's changing to a little square? And there's a little arrow pointing down. Okay, well, here's the thing. Do I actually got this in the right place? I think I do. Let me try it. I'm holding down the Alt key to make this happen. Yeah, you know what? Control Z. Actually, I'm wrong. I have to change it. I think I got to do it this way. Here we go. Oh, why isn't it working? Man, now suddenly I'm going to have trouble with this. Isn't that amazing? Why is this not working? Unbelievable. Unbelievable. All right, well, anyway, I don't know why, but all of a sudden this thing does not want to create a mask for me. So let me go back to my original. Let me do this. Let me go layer. I don't think this has anything to do with it, but I'm just trying to figure out why this thing is not allowing me to mask this. Just don't really understand why it's doing it. It's not making any sense to me at all. Yep, it's just not doing it. No, I don't know. I got this gradient. That's the right gradient. That's it. I'm sure of it. Black and white, and this is a line gradient. Oh, I see what it is. Normal. It's the color mode. That's what the problem is. I'm pretty sure that's what the problem is. Let's try it now. Let's try it now. There we go. Okay, so that's what it was. I had the color mode wrong up there. Okay, but the problem is that's not the direction I wanted to go in. So you have to have this set to normal, and you have to have it set to an opacity of 100%. So now I'm going to come down here, and I'm going to click, and I'm going to shift, and I'm going to drag it up to the top, because that's the direction I wanted to go in. There we go. Okay, so now let's go back to the wallpaper. And let's bring this thing back up. And this thing here on this layer is set to soft light. Why is this? Oh, it's locked. That's what the problem is. Soft light 100%. Okay, so now let's go over here. And if I click on this layer, change this from normal to soft light, you see what it does? It kind of even blends that in slightly. So what you're beginning to see is some of the things that I did to create my piece. So we're at this point. Here is my original. Then I did something like this. I wanted to add a little bit of color to this side. You see a little bit of color there? I wanted to get a little color in there. Okay? So what I did essentially with this was, and I'll show you over here, I came into my piece and I found this piece right here, this guy right there. And I dragged that in and hit OK. And what I did with this is I brought it all the way over to the side here. Let's go view, zoom out so I can get at this a little bit better. And holding down the Shift key and the Alt key, I made this thing fit the area. Let's see if I can make this bigger. There we go. There we go. Okay. And I brought this thing over, hit place, and I brought this thing over to about here, about like that. Okay. And I more or less did the same thing with this, where I came in and I put a mask on it. In this case, what I did with this was I created a mask. And again, I used the gradient tool to do this. And I have the gradient set to, first of all, I have it set to a blend, a linear gradient, and I have it set to black and white. And if I click here, hold down the Shift key and drag across it, it makes that disappear. So you can see basically now color starting to come in, but it's starting to disappear. But I don't really want this fabric so much. I'm more looking for a color on this. All right. So if we go back to this for a second, I'll show you that if I click on that layer, let me unlock these layers, click on that layer, you can see that this is saturation set to 100%. Another blend mode. Okay. All right, so I'm going to come back in here, I click on this, and with that layer set, I'm going to change this down to saturation. And you see what I get? I get exactly the same look as I was getting over here. That's what I was going for. So really what I'm doing is I'm playing around with several things. I'm playing around with the images themselves, the levels of transparency on the images, and the blend modes that I have here. These are all very basic things that you have right here. The other thing that I'm using in certain instances are these masks, which essentially is an automatic process. A layer mask is an automatic process that you can use to make things disappear into one or another, or you can literally draw shapes and erase part of the shapes by virtue of using black and white and then just using a layer mask. So essentially that's what I'm doing to build this thing. Come back over here and let's see what the next layer is. So now the next layer is this guy right here. And if I hide this layer, disable layer mask, that's what I got. I essentially got this. I got a color burn of this particular image right here. Okay, and again, that's nothing more than another picture that I have in here. So this is the actual picture right here. So let's go back and see if I can recreate that. Come in here, click on this, grab this picture and bring this picture in. And again, it's telling me it's damaged. I think I want to make that a little bit bigger. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring this thing up a little bit, about like that maybe, and hit place. Okay, so again, what I did with this image is I came in here and I'm playing around with the different blend modes. And in this case, I think it was saturation. Is that what it was? I used saturation. What was it? Let me go back. I forget now. This is color burn. I'm sorry, color burn. Okay, so we come in here and we're going to change this from normal down to color burn. There, and that's what that looks like. What I then did with this was I came in here, and again, I'll let you see it. I came in here, and I created a layer mask. And this time what I did with this layer mask was, let's go back to this. All right, so I applied a layer mask to this, and I came in here with the gradient, and I believe I chose this gradient right here, and if I'm not mistaken, I went to about the middle of this thing, held down the shift key, and came out. I probably went way out then. I guess I really went way out then. That's probably what I did. Let's see if that's what I did. Let's go back to the original. I'm trying to remember what. Yeah, I guess that's basically what I did. And then what I did with this was, this actually looks like there's another gradient in there. I'm not sure how I did that. I forget how I did that with that gradient. I might have added a color to it. Well, anyway, I'm not going to worry about it too much. We can come up with something similar to what I did anyway. So go back to this. This is what we basically got. Actually, I need to know how I made that thing disappear on the edges is really what it is. There's something I did. Wait, let me think. Let me think for a minute here. What did I do? How did I get that to do that? Let's see what I did. Layer mask, masks. No. Go to the gradient. Yeah, I'm not sure. I forget. I kind of forget how I did that, how I made this thing work. Oh, you know what I think I might have done? Actually, I think what I did was I went to the, that's the layer, click on this. I think I went to the filter. No, wait a minute. Image, let me see. What did I do? Layer. Oh, what did I do? I'm trying to remember. Filter. No, I think I forget. I kind of forget what I did with that. I did something to make this thing warp, and I forget how I did it. So, all right, so I guess I'm stuck. I can't quite remember how I did that, so I'm kind of stuck with this. I do know one thing, though. I do know that I came in here, and I put a bevel and emboss on it. Yeah, I put a bevel and emboss on it, and I don't remember. Let me see, let me just hit OK on that. Yeah, let's go back to this one and see if there's an effect there. Yeah, here we go, bevel and emboss. There's my settings. So bevel and emboss is a layer style. Of course, this isn't going to let me come back and get it. Boy, I'll tell you, it really is fun. Oh, come on. Yeah, it's not letting me go back to it. Oh, it's locked. You know what? I should, okay, there I'm locked. Now I can do it. There we go. Okay, so what I did essentially was I have a inner bevel, smooth, 1018, and then black and gray. So inner bevel, smooth, 1018. Okay, let's see if I can do that, what we get with it. So we come in here and bevel and emboss, and we've got smooth 1000, yeah, and 18. Okay, there you go. Hit OK. Effect, let me see here. Effect, nope, that's not it. I wish I could remember how I warped that thing. I warped it somehow, and I'm trying to remember how I did it. I can't remember now. I'm having a blank out on it. I should have actually made a note to it. Stylize. It's actually got to be a layer style. Layer or image. Yep, I can't remember. Sorry. Yep, I can't remember how I did it. All right, so I'm stuck with that. So basically, that's what I did. And if I come in here, I think I also did this. I think I also softened this. Let me see if I softened it all the way. Yeah, I did. I softened it. Okay, so I got that. Hit OK. All right, so we're that far, except again, I just don't know what I did to distort that thing. I forget how I distorted it. I'll go back to wallpaper. So the next thing that I did here was I created this line across the bottom, and I created that line across the top. I used a picture to do this. I don't really even need a picture to do this, actually, if I thought about it. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back in here, and I'll try it a slightly different way. I'm going to create a new layer, and I'm going to call this shadow 1. And I'm going to come in and I'm going to make a selection. right here. And I actually will drag a guide out. Oh, and there's something else I should probably tell you about. The guides aren't always out. The rulers, I should say, are not always out. If you go to the View menu up here, you'll find that you can come down and you can see rulers. And if I deselect, you see the rulers go away? So if I go to the View menu, come down to Rulers, and click on Rulers, the rulers come back. Now, what I can do is I can generate these guides by just clicking and dragging a guide out. Okay, so here's my two guides. I dragged out a guide. I got actually two guides here, one for the top area and one for the bottom area. The reason I'm putting those guides there is because I want to create a line type shadow. And I'm going to do that by making a selection first, like this, okay, on shadow 1. And I'm just going to fill it with a color. It doesn't really matter truly what color that is. So I'm going to come in there and I'm just going to fill it with white. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go Edit, Free Transform, and I'm going to actually extend this out a little bit like that, extend this out a little bit, and extend this out a little bit. And then I'm going to hit Apply. Now, the reason I did this is because I'm about to put a shadow on this thing, and I want the shadow to not appear except where I put it, which is on the top. So with shadow 1, I'm going to come in here, and I'm going to go Inner Shadow. Come on. Okay, and now I got my inner shadow starting, and I want to make it bigger. So I'm going to go Distance. I'm going to start bringing it up about like that. And what I'm going to do next is I got it set to 90 degrees. So you can change the degree of your shadow on this. Oh, and part of the problem, let me hit cancel. Part of the problem when you do this is you'll notice that it kind of takes over everything. So when you do this, what you have to do is go in and click on Effects and go Inner Shadow. And you see where it says Use Global Light? If you deselect Global Light, what that will then do is that will leave any other effects that you have alone, and it'll just focus on the effect that you're putting on this layer. So I removed Global Light, and now I'm going to take this thing and make it 90. I probably should just go Shift. There you go, 90. Okay, so there it is, and I'm going to start bringing this out, and I'll bring it out to about, let's say about right there. And I'll hit OK. And so now I got my shadow, but the problem is you can see this white, and I don't want to see the white. I just want to see that line shadow. So one of the nice things about this is you have the opacity, which means that if I click on this, I can start making that whole layer opaque. But that's not what I want. What I want is this. I want the shadow to be that dark, and I want my white color in the background to go away. So not only do you have opacity, but you have fill opacity. So what I'm going to do is click on the fill opacity, and I'm going to drag it all the way down to 0. And when I do that, I end up with something like this. And I'm going to go Select, Deselect, and that's what I end up with. Now I'm going to go to my, oops, see, that's what you end up with. I didn't really mean to move it, but that's good because you can see what's happening here. Control Z to put it back in. All right, so I'm going to, oh, geez, let me get out of there. There we go. Let me, I'm trying to get rid of the guides. There we go. Got the guides gone. Let me get rid of the guides. Okay. Oh, come on. Give me a break. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing up here. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to come in, I'm going to click on this, and I'm going to drag myself a shape out till I hit right about like that. Okay? And once again, I'm going to go to Select, Transform Selection, and I'm going to drag this up a little bit like that. I'm going to drag this over a little bit like that, and drag this over a little bit like that. And then I'll get my paint bucket tool again, hit Apply. This is going to be Shadow 2. So I click on that, and I'll call it Shadow 2. Now again, just to, Shadow 2. The thing that I'm trying to make you understand here is I'm doing all this stuff because I want you to see some of the things that you could do to play around with different layers and different things to get these different effects going. So this is basically why I'm going to the trouble of doing this. All right, so once again here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on Inner Shadow. And once again, this will come up, but the problem is set at 90, the shadow is going to be up here, and you can't see it. The rest of the settings are probably okay, but I need this to be negative 90. So I'm going to just click on and put a negative there. And notice that when I did that, it changed the shadow down to here. And let's go a distance of, what happened to my shadow here? Why am I not getting my shadow? Cancel, wait a minute, let me see here. Oh, I know what it is. I forgot to put the color in. So I got to put the color in first. I'm sorry. There we go. I forgot to put the color in. All right, so now I'm going to come in here and go inner shadow. I'm going to change it to negative 90. Negative 90. And now you can see the shadows beginning to show. So I'm going to drag this thing up until I get about there. That's probably about where I want it, right there. And I'm good. Hit OK. And then what I'm going to do with this inner shadow is the same thing. I'm going to come over to the fill and click. I'm going to drag the fill out until the fill is set to 0. And now if you deselect that, select, deselect. Again, if you start looking at the wallpaper, you're seeing how I've created this. Again, I'm sorry I can't remember how I did that, but you get the general idea at least. So we've done most of this stuff by just using several effects and different layers, and of course the different blend modes up here and levels of opacity. So what does that leave us with? If we come back over here, what that leaves us with is our shape and our text. Okay, so I think I have just about enough time to show you this. So the first thing, let's go back to my other one here, my one that I'm working on. And down here, we have the rectangle tool, the rounded rectangle, the ellipse, the polygon, the line tool, and the custom shape tool. So what I did was I chose the custom shape tool. Then up in here, I have a bunch of shapes. And what you could do is you could click in here and you could load different shapes. And there's all sorts of shapes down here. Okay? What I used was, I believe I used the Grime Vector Pack. That's the one that I used to get these shapes. And the one that I chose was this guy right here, which you can see right there. So if I come in here and click and drag, I get that shape right there, which is the splotch shape that you saw I had right there. So there's my splotch shape. That's all I did to do that. It's really cool because you don't have to do very much to do it. So let's go back over to here and take a look at that shape. So what I did again was a bevel and emboss on this. So I'll go back in. This is the one that I did with the bevel and emboss, and this one I hid. So this one, bevel and emboss soft light. So that's essentially what I did with this. So we'll go back to mine, and I'll click on it, and I'll go to Effect, Bevel and Emboss. Okay, and I think what I did was I closed the globe light off, and yeah, there it is. I got it set to the bottom, I believe. And what I did was I think I went darker on the shadow. I went a little bit darker on the shadow and hit OK. And now let's zoom in on this and let's see if that's similar. I'd say that's pretty similar to what I had. Yeah, that's probably pretty good. There you go. So that's basically what I did to do that. I used bevel and emboss, and I just went inner bevel, and I set the angle to 120, and I set the level of opacity up on the dark higher. What that means essentially is as I drag it down, it gets lighter. As I drag it up, it gets darker. It makes it look more like it's sitting on the piece. So I just changed that. I didn't change the highlights. I just changed the dark. So I hit OK again. Go back to this one. And finally, what I did with that shape was I changed it to soft light. So let's go back and do that and see what that does. So with this shape selected, I'm going to come down and I'm going to find soft light, which is right there. And that's what it looks like. And you know something? I just thought that looked great. I thought that really worked properly. All right, so I'm going to now go and look at the last thing, which is the text. There's the wallpaper text. So there's a couple of things going on with this. Okay, so let me double click on this and show you that I use Times New Roman bold, and the bold's italic. Yeah, bold italic. And I used the 277. So it's Times and bold italic. and 277. All right, and it's white. Let me go back to my original, or the one that I'm working on. There we go. One that I'm working on is here. And let's go view, fit artboard and window, fit on screen. There we go. And let's get the type tool. So now I'm going to come down here, click on the type tool, and I'm going to click to place the cursor right there. And I think I just spelled out W-A-L-L-P-A-P-E-R, wallpaper. And actually, what I like about this, what is that what I wrote actually, wallpaper? Hold on, let me go back. Yeah, wallpaper. That's what I did, wallpaper. Okay, because it looks different. I guess it's because the other thing was smaller. But that doesn't really matter all that much. Maybe what I'll do is I'll make it a little bit bigger. Oh, and by the way, you can double click to reselect this. And then you can make this thing bigger. Let's make this 350. 350. That's better. And hit that, and there we go. Okay, so now I've got my wallpaper set in there. So now that I've done that, what I want to do is I want to come in here, go to Effects, and I want to go Bevel and Emboss. Now, what I was trying to accomplish with this, okay, is I'm trying to make this thing look sort of like it's a carved into the thing. So actually, I think it's a emboss. Let me see. You know what? Cancel. I don't exactly remember which one I used. Let me go back in and check it. Bevel and Emboss. It's inner bevel 817.21. All right, let me make a note so I can actually go back and do this. Inner 817.21. Okay, let's go back. Cancel. Go back to this one. And with that selected, Effects, Bevel and Emboss, inner bevel, 867, and what's that at? 867, and size what? 21? 21, right there, 21. There we go, 21, there we go. Okay, so there you have it. Now, I think what I also did with this is I think I set the opacity on the black darker. I did. I set the black opacity darker. Hit OK. That's what I did. Okay, so now I basically got this. So then the next step is I use an outer glow on this thing. First of all, I used color burn and an opacity of 100%, but a fill of 0. Color burn. Okay, so what I'm going to do first is I'll come in here, and I will set this thing to color burn, right there, okay? And I will set the fill opacity down to 0, and I actually don't even need to do that because color burn really did it for me. And if I'm not mistaken, I can come in here and go to Effect, and I can go outer glow. Let's go to outer glow. There we go. And what I did with this outer glow was I set the spread quite a bit bigger and the size quite a bit bigger till I kind of blew it out like that. And let's see if I bring it back in. That's what I did. Let's bring it in. There we go. That's kind of what I did. The size is a little bit smaller. And then I just set the opacity level a little bit lighter and hit OK. And now, basically, that's more or less what I did. Now, the nice thing about this is that I did that effect on this wallpaper, this text. If I wanted to, I could actually change this to normal. And now I could come in here and I could actually put a little bit of that fill back in. And I could make that text show up a little bit more. Okay? Even if I wanted to, I could change the, set it to overlay. That's even a little bit better. So you got to really play around. You got to really play around with these things a little bit to get it to look the way you want it to look. But you can, in the end, get it to look the way you want it to look. This is what I really like about this whole thing. Once you get this whole thing working the way you want, you could easily come in here and you could go to your text and you could double click on your text and you could change this to Bill Sweeney. Bill Sweeney. And can't even spell my own name. Bill Sweeney. So file save. And let's go, let's hide this. And that kind of gives you an idea of what I did to create this thing. I know I ran into a problem with that one layer, but I think everything else pretty much looks the same as it did. Then what you're going to do is when you get all done with this, you're going to come up to the File menu and you're going to go Save As. And this is in week 1. I'm going to set this to be a JPEG. And you're going to save it in here. I'll call this My Wallpaper. MY_WALLPAPER. And save it. And I'm going to go maximum size with it on this and hit OK. And or go File, Save for Web, and come in here and go Save and hit Cancel. Actually, what I want to do is I don't want it to be low. Let me bring this up to about 50%. And again, why am I doing this? I'm doing this because I want this thing to go from 14.6 megs to 1.3 megs. See, that's even too big. I want to bring it down further. 861K. Let's see how that looks. I guess that'll be okay. Yeah, that'll be okay. But you see it's now 156K. Hit Save. And again, Wallpaper, JPEG, I'll go Option or Alt. Make that Alt. Come on. _ALT. And hit Save. And now I've basically saved my wallpaper. And that's essentially my lesson for the night. I hope it helps. You should give it a try and create yourself a wallpaper. Keep in mind that I will be available on Wednesday evening and Friday evening, and you can find that information here in your announcements. Okay? So you all have a good night, and I look forward to seeing you again next week. Good night.